We've emboldened some incompetent people. We've also emboldened some pretty racist people. We really have. That's the thing. Not all Leave voters are racist, but racists seem to have taken the Leave vote as a bit of a vote of confidence. And I know this more than most people, because the night of the referendum, something happened. Now, I'd woken up that morning, seen the result, and had my aforementioned fecal catastrophe. Then I set about my day. Now, that night, I was booked to do a gig at the Comedy Store, just around the corner from here, in Piccadilly Circus in London. Very historic venue. Very different atmosphere to a theatre show like this, because you've come because you like things. Whereas at the Comedy Store, they hate everything, right? It's an angry, kind of quite confrontational place. People are often on a night out, they can be a little bit drunk. And normally, that would sort of intimidate me. But on that day, I thought, oh, this is perfect. I'll just go and I'll talk about the referendum. It'll be airing a wound for all of us. It'll be really cathartic. That's the great thing about stand-up comedy. You can react to things that have happened that day. And I went to the Comedy Store and I got on stage when I was asked. I didn't just run on and be like, I've got something to say, right? I was asked and I ran on stage and I was like, the EU referendum, this is bullshit. I was kind of said what I've said to you tonight about Leave voters not being racist, but the Leave campaign being racist. And I had a slightly testy exchange with a Leave voter who was shouting at me. Then I made a joke about Nigel Farage that he laughed at and everyone in the room laughed at, and we were fine. There was, I dare say, quite the atmosphere of Bon Homie in the room, which is exactly the sort of sentence that does not endear me to the Comedy Store audience on a Friday night. And after that, I thought, oh, I'll talk about history. I was saying, I studied history, which is interesting, because in 25 years' time, people are going to study this day. We're living through history right now, because we don't know what's going to happen. And when I said that, a man stood up and shouted, "You can go home!" Now, first of all, go home is old school. No one's told me to go home for about 16 years. I don't even know where he heard that phrase. It's like someone wanted to be racist and to find out what to say, asked Jeeves. It's insane. The last time someone told me to go home is only because I went to school in buttfuck nowhere Kent, in a town where the ethnic diversity would increase by 100% every time there was a Simpsons episode with Apu in it, right? And by the end, I was just used to it. I'd get off the bus, somebody would be like, "Go home!" I'd be like, "Fuck you, see you tomorrow, Ricky!" Because it was that sort of place. Well, on that night, that felt much more serious because of what had happened that morning. Now, what I will say for the Comedy Store audience is overwhelmingly, the majority of them started shouting at this guy, shouting in support of me. Even people who had clearly been Leave voters, this was a line they were not prepared to cross. They then spent the next couple of days defending me on social media because someone, not Big Johnny Go Home, but one of his fucking lieutenants, was contacting me on Twitter saying, the only reason that man told you to go home was that you said all white people were racist cunts. Now, first of all, guys, what can I say? I call it like I see it, right? Of course I didn't say that out loud, right? Now, luckily, I had a recording of the gig, so I got that recording and I was preparing to send it to people saying, look, this didn't happen. I got a recording to show that it didn't happen. But I didn't need to, because all the people who were at the gig started replying saying, this didn't happen, you're lying. But it was super interesting to me that someone had to come up with a story to justify someone else being racist. It's not good justification. Let's walk through his version of events. I walk out on stage, say all white people are racist cunts, at which point a white person stands up and tells me to go home, thus proving my point. Like, if that guy had really wanted to stick it to me under the circumstances, he'd had to be like, no, stay! Now, in that moment, I didn't really know what to do. Part of me wanted to take his advice and go the fuck home. But then another part of me kicked in. Here's the thing about me. I know I seem like a sort of ineffectual man, but I don't like being bullied, especially not about my race. Never liked it. When I was 5 years old, a kid called me a packy, hated it. Don't like it now that I'm 31 years old, someone's come to my place of work to abuse me, right? I belong in this country. I was born here. I rejoice in this country's successes and take responsibility for its failures. I'm not going anywhere. The only way anyone is getting me out of this country is by putting me in the fucking ground, okay? Or if I get a good job offer from America. But that does seem increasingly unlikely for a number of reasons. And that spirit of defiance seized me on stage. I thought I was booked to do 20 minutes of stand-up comedy humour. And 20 minutes of stand-up comedy humour is what I shall do. I've never been so determined to finish a set in my entire life. Now, what I will say is it is quite a tricky segue to go from being racially abused back into your prepared material. Now, I managed it because I'm nothing if not technically accomplished. But also, the audience that night was so on board with me beyond my comedy that they gave me the greatest gig I will ever experience in my entire life. Because everything I said, they were like, you shut up. We like browns. I was having the greatest time. And I looked down at my watch and realised that I had reached my stated aim and done my contractually obliged 20 minutes, right? Now, at that point, I could have left the stage. Arguably, I should have left the stage. And I did not leave the stage. Because at that point, I decided Friday night at the Comedy Store was the perfect time for a completely earnest, Dead Poets Society style lecture about the value of social cohesion. There's women on a hen do with devil horns in here, and I'm up on stage being like, guys, we have to fight this! We must show that this is not our country! Oh, Captain, my Captain! I didn't say that, I may as well have fucking done, right? Now, the reason I think this happened is I think it was a combination of three things. Number one, I reached the end of my set and I realised that I had done that, so the adrenaline started to leave my body, right? Number two, I started to be genuinely concerned. What did this mean for our country going forward? And number three, I was genuinely moved by the response of the audience, because the overwhelming majority of people that in that room, leave or remain, were standing up for me and my right to continue to be in this country, right? And it made me realise, and I think it's important for all of us to bear in mind over the next weeks, months and years, that I still believe that there are more good people than bad people in this country. It's just important that the good people make themselves heard every so often, right? Now, those three things caused me to have what I can only describe as an emotional breakdown, right? So I'm standing on stage giving this speech, right? Now, these people were so nice that instead of reacting how I would have reacted if I'd been in that audience, which would have been to be like, dude. Like that. Instead of doing that, they stood up and started applauding. So now I've turned Friday night at the Comedy Store into a full fucking rally. And when they stood up, that pushed me completely over the edge. And I disappeared outside of the city limits of Sanityville into the crazy, crazy forest. Because I closed my set on Friday night at the Comedy Store with these words. I looked out into the audience and I said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, good night, and God save the Queen! Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out. I hope you had a good time. You were a great audience. Thank you very much.